Those of you who watch this program are very familiar with the shenanigans of Senator Steve Yarborough of Chandler, who routinely sponsors legislation to expand the private school tax credit program, which directly lines his pockets since he runs the second largest school tuition organization in the state and is able to skim off 10% of all tax dollars given to his organization. Well, now Mr. Yarborough, not satisfied with just helping himself to your tax dollars, is sponsoring legislation to actually undermine his true competition, public schools. So, how does he propose to do this? Well, Mr. Yarborough wants to make it much more difficult for public school districts to pass bonds and overrides. Bonds and overrides allow districts to go directly to local voters to make an additional investment in schools through a property tax levy that must expire within 7 years. In the past, these levies had been for supplemental or enrichment type programs and for building new schools. Now, because of the severe state cutbacks in K-12 funding, totaling $3 billion since 2008, school districts are going to local voters asking them to pay for bare-bone basics. The state is providing zero funds to build new schools, so districts are forced to go to voters to do this now. If the bond measure fails, a new school cannot be built even if there are big population booms in that school district. If budget levies fail, there are dire consequences for districts, including increased class sizes, teacher firings, school closures, and more. Passing bonds and overrides is already very, very difficult. Statewide, about half of all bonds and overrides fail. So, what is Senator Yarborough doing to make sure even more fail? Let's look at the details of some of his proposed legislation this session. The first piece is Senate Bill 1182. First, the bill will remove language in the publicity pamphlet that goes to all voters explaining what the bond or override will actually do. So the only language in the publicity pamphlet will be the pro and con statements, which can be submitted by anyone and are never removed for lack of truthfulness. There will be no neutral explanation of the override or bond measure in the publicity pamphlet. Yarborough's bill would also not allow the district to go to voters again if the override or bond fails once. The district would have to wait until it completely expires before going back to voters. So, basically, Yarborough is trying to interfere with local elections and tell local voters what they can and cannot vote on. Now, this is not the only Yarborough-sponsored override bond monkey-wrenching piece of legislation out there. There's also Senate Bill 1254, which would require all district override and bond elections, as well as district elections to sell property, to be held in even years, so only in 2012, 2014, 2016. This again doesn't make any sense. What they're trying to do is limit districts from going to voters in low turnout election years because typically only motivated voters go to polls in low turnout years, and districts hope that those voters will be more likely to pass bonds and overrides. But this is also a big problem for districts that are trying to sell property, which requires them to get approval from voters. If you have a pending sale of property in December of 2014, is it really realistic to postpone confirmation of that sale for 2 more years until 2016? And if those potential bills aren't bad enough, here's another one for you. Senate Bill 1287 requires all override and bond language to be approved by none other than Legislative Council, which is a committee of legislators. And if proper approval is not received and an election goes ahead, then the legislature could void the outcome of the result. So this is legislators basically giving legislators the right to void the will of the people if they decide that all the I's and T's have not been properly dotted and crossed. Pretty outrageous. Well, Senator Yarborough routinely shows no shame, so this type of legislation coming from him is not really a surprise. But you might be a little more surprised by the Arizona businesses whose organization called the Arizona Tax Research Association, known as ATRA, have signed on to support some of this legislation and are trying to push it through, specifically the portion that limits the number of times districts can go to voters and prevents neutral information from appearing in the publicity pamphlet. Some of the businesses who are on the board of ATRA are Circle K, AT&T, Southwest Gas, Intel, State Farm Insurance, and Cox Communications. Now I know I'm going to be making some different consumer choices based on that information. I hope you will join me.